we're back. It's been a while since we did a film noir review, and we're doing Hitchhiker from 1953. This is a very interesting movie because it's an unusual film noir in that you don't have the claustrophobic feel of the inner city blues type thing, and it's not this man fighting fighting destiny or fighting faith, and a woman kind of controlling him, no femme fatales or anything like that. In fact, there are no women in this movie at all, which is very surprising because not only did a woman direct it, but it was also a woman that's also an actress, Ida Lupino. She didn't even give herself a role in the film. The only female presence we get is a woman's voice off screen being killed at the beginning of the film, and then we see a little girl. So I thought that was interesting, and also the fact that this is shot mainly in like little villages in and around Mexico. What did you think of the contrast of this and standard film noirs?
I thought it was an interesting contrast, and it just goes to show that a film noir doesn't have to take place in a city. I mean, a sense of terror can be created, and a sense of even claustrophobia can be created in a wide open setting. The claustrophobia being the feeling within that car with William Tallman and him pointing the gun the whole time, and the fact that they're forced to stay with him. He sleeps with the proverbial one eye open. When can they get away? What can they do? That sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
the
it's weird.
psychological dynamic between them is what creates the tension rather than the setting. Well, the setting adds to it though, because it's so out in the middle of nowhere. Where are they going to get help? How? They don't have cell phones. They don't have,
When he's sleeping with that one eye open, it's like you kind of feel that terror of like, should they make a run for it? Should they not make a run for it? Like, what's going to happen? But yeah, it completely works so well. Being a woman yourself, like, what do you feel like? Do you feel any kind of like? What's your opinion on the fact that there are no women in this movie? We don't even see their wives; we just hear about them. Does that affect your appreciation for this movie at all? Having no on-screen representation, despite the off-screen representation with Lupino?
It actually does not. In fact, if I were to speculate on why Lupino made the film the way she did, I think she did it as a study of men. And that's why the focus is on the men. And their relationships with their wives is a part of this. But it's as if they're taking a little detour from what they told their wives they're going to do, and going off to this other place in Mexico instead of going up into the mountains like they said they were going to. So it's a study of their behavior. So it seems pretty appropriate actually that it should focus mainly on men, because I think she was looking into kind of probing the male mentality a little bit with this film.
Mm-hmm. She actually interviewed two people that were held hostage by the actual killer that this movie is based on, because it is based on a true story. I thought that was very interesting. So a lot of like what we're seeing on screen may have been from actual stories that she was told from the men who were kidnapped. And I like the fact that it was based on the trauma that these men are dealing with, rather than the heroics of how are we going to escape and defeat the bad guy and save the day, and that type of machismo type thing. Do you think that directly comes from Lupino being a woman and her take on this material specifically?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know, but I think that what you just said, focusing on the terror of the two men, is part of what makes this movie so interesting. It's really, most of what goes on here is psychological, and it's just they're being intimidated by this guy, and they don't know how to respond. And that helplessness and the fact that it's based on something that actually happened lends itself towards the terror one could feel in watching this movie.
Mhm. Yeah, I thought it was interesting that she interviewed the killer, who was Billy Cook, before he died. It reminds me of a more recent movie like Monster, where the female serial killer was actually interviewed by the director, another female director as well with Monster. So I thought that was interesting to get the killer's perspective and also the people that were held hostage their perspective. It added to the sense of realism I felt in this movie. It almost has a documentary feel to it, in that the only people that really get the movie treatment, quote unquote, and where a character is set up and established and we learn about them, are really just those three main characters. Everyone else that's on screen is just there to serve a function of giving us information, pushing the story forward, and it almost feels just like real people. All the authority stuff feels very procedural. It doesn't feel Hollywood in the way these scenes are depicted. There's a lot of tension as they go through these Mexican villages where there's no subtitles. Um, and to further entrench us in it, the killer doesn't speak Spanish. So there's that tension as well, where it's like, okay, one of these guys does speak Spanish, the killer doesn't. And for someone like myself who doesn't as well, it's like I feel that tension even more watching these scenes. What do you think?
I agree with you. Yeah. The fact that he doesn't speak Spanish really makes it difficult for them trying to communicate with these people and get things done, which totally adds to the tension. And it's like, how do you manage this without at least trying to speak some Spanish? And hey, why don't you learn some Spanish, dude? Yeah. I mean, come on. But he's not a very bright serial killer in many ways.
Mhm.
Although he manages psychologically to freak them out enough, and certainly with the gun. And the other thing I was going to say was, despite the fact that he admonishes them about that, the man manages to slip in the via con Dios with the girl.
Yeah,
I thought
yeah.
that was pretty cool. It was a girl, wasn't it? Or was it
Yes,
a
it was a
boy?
little girl. Yeah.
That was a little girl. That was a little girl. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I like that part. I also like the part where he takes off his ring, Lovejoy takes off his ring and leaves it at the gas station. It's
Mhm.
like, okay, I love my wife, but I just have to do this because maybe somebody will find it. Or does that indicate something else to you? I'm curious.
No, I think you nailed it. And they did find it, and it did help them in tracking them down to know that, okay, we're on the right lead to find these guys. Um, this kind of reminds me of other similar movies like Suddenly or The Sadist, where you have this killer this killer like kidnapping these people, and it's like, is he going to kill them? We get to know the killer, we get to know the people held hostage, and there's all this tension there. Something like The Sadist has more of a bleak ending. I thought it would have been interesting. It would have made this movie even more bleak, as if they never found the ring, you know.
Mm.
But it was good that they found it, because this movie is pretty dark enough already. But yeah, I thought that was a good touch, leaving the ring, and then it ended up being found by the authorities to end up
Hmm.
helping them catch it. And you're right, it was like this last minute desperate attempt to like just do anything, because there was a contrast between Lovejoy and O'Brien's characters, where Lovejoy is like, okay, let's be smart about this, let's plan this out, let's try to outsmart him, where O'Brien was just more emotion and like, listen,
Hmm.
like there's a sense of desperation about him. And I think that uh, the killer, Tallman, in this sense, in this case, was he could feel that, and he didn't trust O'Brien because he knew he was volatile, and that tension between those two, the way they did the target practice scene, where he was shooting the gun at him, the way he was like always bludgeoning him. Like I think he even pulled the trigger on him one time. Always assaulting him and the back and forth, stealing his clothes. I thought that tension between those two was done really well. What are your thoughts on? I guess we can go through each of them individually. What are your thoughts on O'Brien and him playing this type of character, and maybe other similar characters he may have played in other film noirs as well?
Well, I thought O'Brien was really excellent in this part. He's good at playing this type of character too. His character here reminded me so much of his character in DOA in the sense, not only is the situation similar, he's off on a kind of a detour away from his normal life and gets involved in a terrible situation due to basically no fault of his own and in a rather random way. Then there's the reaction to all the things that are happening. He's very emotional, as you said, and he's good at doing that.
Yeah, he
The
had
part
a really
where he's like begging God,
yeah. That's the scene I was
screaming for
thinking
help.
about. Yeah, yeah. He
That
had a
gets me.
similar scene to that in DOA that you mentioned, where
Oh
he
yeah.
finds out that he's injected with the poison, and he just
Yep.
goes running through the streets
I
screaming.
know. I know.
And you're right. In this movie, my favorite scene was when he was yelling at the plane, like "Hey," like and he was just screaming to God, and he's like, "God, please!" And he was just begging, begging.
I
And then
know.
Tallman is like, "Leave him alone. Can't you see he's praying?"
I know.
It's just,
Leave him alone. Can't you see he's praying?
Just like, yeah.
yeah, their
Nice.
interaction was the best part of the movie to me.
Oh
Him
God,
and
he was
Tallman.
cold. Tellman was cold in this,
But
wasn't he?
yeah, let's talk a little bit more about Tallman. Like I
Oh
mentioned
my gosh.
before, the whole eye thing was interesting. What did you think of his performance overall?
I thought it was a good performance. I think William Tallman is the kind of person who plays that kind of role really well. I mean, I know him from Perry Mason. That's the first time I ever saw him in anything. So my thoughts are probably colored with thoughts of him playing Hamilton Berger. So when I see him in a role like this, I can totally believe him in it, because that vicious part of Berger would come out of, that vicious part of the personality would come out of him. And it was pretty, with his eye the way it was scary. He's
Yeah.
a scary kind of person.
Okay, so the final main character in this was Frank Lovejoy. He probably had the most thankless role of the three, because as an actor, you want those kind of scenes where you can really lose it. And he was kind of like, I guess, the straight man because he was the level-headed one. But I think he still did a
Exactly.
really good performance. Tragically, he died young at 50 of a heart attack, so his career didn't go on that long. But I thought he did a serviceable role in this, if not spectacular in any way.
I think the nature of the role required that. It's like you needed somebody who kept their head and somebody who was more emotional. And they worked well together that way. I think sometimes we tend to overlook the actors who play these more subtle type characters, and don't realize just what a wonderful job they're doing being the every guy or the
Mhm.
every person.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I guess the final person we can highlight is Ida Lupino, the director herself. When I was younger, the first thing I knew her from was The Twilight Zone, the 16 millimeter Shrine, which is kind of like a different take on Sunset Boulevard in a way. And then later I found out she directed one of my favorite episodes of The Twilight Zone, The Masks, which was also interesting. And later, as I got older and I got into film noir, she starred in a lot of great movies as well. She's a very good actress, a pretty good director. I thought there were very few flaws with the movie. We already talked about the acting. The tension was the best part of the movie. And I think the acting was at the forefront of the tension. And the second would come the direction. I think she did really good pacing with the film.
Mhm.
And the score was also good. The score kind of enhanced the tension as well. But I thought she did a great job. The only knock I would have on it is that it has a little bit of a TV show look. It doesn't have that classic shadowy film noir look. They didn't work with the shadows as much, but the setting kind of affected that in a way. But there wasn't a ton of creativity in the cinematography. It was more like functional. Let's just get all our coverage the way you would do with a TV show. But overall, I think she did a great directing job with this. Any thoughts, Lupina?
My thoughts in general is that I've always been totally impressed with the fact that she is the one film noir director that I know of who is female. The one early film noir director that I know of who's female. And she could hold her own with these people and get the movie looking presumably the way she wanted it to, and so on. Working with the actors, just just a real inspiration to me as a woman and as a filmmaker. Because how many actresses back then were doing this sort of thing? Were trying to become directors. Um, in general, I think it's just cool to see a woman take on a project like this and try to make it work, and does make it work.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Something else I was going to say, but I can't remember what it was.
Okay, no problem. If it comes back to you, you can always add it in.
Oh, her interest in social issues. She was very, very motivated to write about social issues. She has another movie called Outrage that I've seen about a woman who's raped and some of the trauma associated with that.
Mhm. Yeah, I haven't seen it, but
It's
I did
another
read that
film
she was
noir.
focused
Yeah.
on social issues as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also wanted to touch before we wrapped up on the. We already talked about the fact that okay, this is a woman director. You were getting a different perspective on the movie. I
Mhm.
also felt not only did that, I think she brought a sense of, all right, I'm going to strip away some of the general masculinity that comes with this stuff and more so focus on the trauma that these characters are going through and not let it be about the hero shooting up and killing the bad guy. But I also felt like there was another feel to the movie, which may not have been intentional, but I kind of felt like these guys had more than a friendship. It almost felt like there was a romance between the two male characters, where it's like they're lying to their wives about where they're going. They're not being honest. They're trying to get away alone together. Um, they have chances to escape, but they won't. One won't leave without the other. I feel like maybe it goes a little bit beyond friendship. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it does. Maybe it's intentional. Maybe it's not. But I kind of got a romance feel between the two characters, and I think that's kind of why we don't really see them try to do too much to get away because one is always thinking of the other as well. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I didn't pick up on that vibe as much as you did, obviously. To me, it was like two guys who just wanted to get away from their normal lives and their family, family obligations, and just go fishing in Mexico. Um,
I
and
guess
some
part of
of
that
that,
is being a guy in
uh-huh.
that as a guy, I know when I get away with like my guy friends, we're always talking about girls. It's like it's not necessarily just it's getting away to either complain about the women in our lives or talk about like, oh man, this girl, that girl. So it's like there's very little of completely stripping away. Sometimes yeah, you do want to get away with your buddies, but the complete absence of not just women but talk of women was what really
Hmm.
kind of like brought that to mind. So, but go ahead, you can finish your thought.
Well, that's an interesting point. Hadn't thought about that either, but maybe as a woman, I wouldn't think about it. I don't know. But I thought
And
that
maybe that's why she didn't include it in the script because a woman wrote it. So maybe it's unintentional that way. So there you
I
go.
think she co-wrote it with somebody else. I thought it was a guy.
Oh yeah, yeah, you're right.
I
A guy did write it, but maybe it's from her
I think
direction.
she
But
had, yeah, I don't know, but
yeah, you're right. Somebody else wrote it. She may have some say in the script, but it wasn't her that wrote it. That's a good point.
yeah. No, I can't remember the point I was going to make.
I'm sorry about that. I was
I
saying about the
hate when that
homosexuality
happens.
stuff, and then you were saying not really.
Right. Well, I hadn't picked up on it. Let's just put
Yeah,
it that way.
yeah, yeah.
I wondered, okay, they're close, right?
Mhm.
And I wondered how much of that closeness came out of participation in the war. Had these guys been in the war together, or any war together?
It didn't
Had
come
they
up in the
ser-
dialogue. That
Yeah,
may be a possibility, but it didn't come up in the dialogue
I,
itself.
yeah, because sometimes when guys do that in these movies, I have a tendency to think of them sticking together the way soldiers would stick together.
I mean, overall, I think she did a great job with it. It's a very tense movie. It's a very good movie. It's brisk as well. The pacing. It doesn't overstay its welcome with the length, and I would definitely highly recommend it for a rewatch if you've seen it before, or a first watch if you haven't seen it before. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
I'd say definitely I agree with you. It's an excellent movie for watching or rewatching. I've seen it at least 3 times now, and each time I watch it, I notice something different. So, yeah, definitely watch this one.
It's all right now, Roy. It's all right.